Hello everyone and welcome to the BD Revolution webinar. We've been really excited about doing this now for a couple of weeks. Got some fantastic names on the bill that I'll introduce you to in just a second, but as a quick intro, this is a little webinar, podcast, LinkedIn Live, whatever you want to call it. Something we wanted to get together here just to talk about BD and recruitment. It's all the rage at the minute and I thought we had to get some really good names in the room for it. So I am delighted to introduce you to three very, very good friends of mine. We've got Dougie from SourceWhale, Tara from Venatrix, and Marc from OneUp. I'll give you each of you guys 10, 15 seconds, maybe 20 seconds if you want to push it to introduce yourselves. Dougie, do you want to go first?
I'll go first. I feel like it's the start of a game show. Like we're the contestants and you're the host. That's what's happening here. So yeah, my name's Dougie Lone. I'm the CRO at SourceWhale, and we are the business development and headhunting platform for recruiters. I've been in and around the recruitment industry since I was 18. So both, firstly as a recruiter and then, as an individual, first boots in the ground for a rec tech company. Grew there and then recently joined SourceWhale. So that's a little bit about me. Should I pass to Tara to give an intro from her side?
Next on the game show. Hi everyone. So my name's Tara. I'm an account executive at Venatrix, so responsible for driving new logos for Venatrix. We're an SDR recruitment agency, so specialise in finding SDRs for SaaS companies.
You could throw it to Marc.
And I'll throw it to Marc. Actually threw it.
100%. I don't know if I have to awkwardly catch it for the LinkedIn Live, but who knows? So I'm Marc. I'm the SDR Manager here at OneUp Sales. Derry's biggest pain in his side. I've been around recruitment and SaaS for about 4 to 5 years now. And now recruitment's heading more in the SDR market. I actually have some valuable insights for a change, so looking forward to it.
Don't put yourself down too much, Marc. You've always got some valuable insights in there somewhere. I want to start first and foremost on what is BD, because I think it's two letters that is all the rage. Everyone's talking about it, but I feel first you've really got to set the groundwork and say, what is BD? And Dougie, I'll come to you for this one to start things off as well. In your view, in SourceWhale's view, I imagine, what is BD in recruitment?
It's a really interesting question. So I would say that business development is really like the single most important part of anyone's role. Whether that's in recruitment or in SaaS or anywhere. So really, if we're looking at it at a very high level, it's essentially the act of engaging with new potential customers, right? So being able to not just identify them, but also to be able to engage with them and win business with them, and then obviously, naturally generate revenue from that relationship as well. I think essentially, if we look at organizations, whether that's recruitment, SaaS companies, or even law firms, it always amazes me actually how much business development work lawyers need to do. It often goes unnoticed, but it's just really simply impossible to achieve growth that people want to gain within their organizations if they don't have a business development culture in place. And if you look at that from a SourceWhale perspective, that's looking about having something that is scalable, repeatable, predictable, and is efficient as well. And I'm sure we can go into that in a little bit more detail as the conversation progresses.
Oh, yeah. Scalable, repeatable, I feel are the two most common words that you hear generally in most SaaS processes. So I think you're pretty much spot on. What about on your side, Marc? Obviously, like you said, you run a team of SDRs or BD reps, as you might call them, inside a SaaS. What's your take on what BD is?
BD is the activities that the team will carry out to try and drive new business and revenue, started from generating meetings from cold calls. So similar to how recruiters may be calling up potential hiring managers to get job briefs and book those first initial meetings to understand it better. An SDR does the exact same role. So business development is the activities needed to drive those meetings for new revenue.
Makes sense. Tara? Come on, Marc, you can throw it back to Tara now. Throw the football or whatever the hell it was. Throw a Lego box at her from behind you if you want.
Pretty much very similar to what Dougie and Marc have said. I think it's very much being responsible for finding new businesses that you want to engage with and work with. I think in terms of recruitment, it's always been quite a big divide between, are you a 180 recruiter, are you a 360 recruiter? And I think that's something that has never really been in SaaS. Everyone just does business development. And I think within the recruitment industry now, everyone wants to do BD. You're more employable if you do BD as well. So I think it's a really important skill to have.
And I guess there's a question to you on that one, Tara, because you were at Venatrix. You came and spent 7 months with us prior to that, Venatrix for a good while. So you've sort of seen the shift over the years as well. a lot of people might turn around and say, if they're cynical, and just say, well, recruiters always had to pick up the phone and try and do business. What's different now compared to, say, 3-4 years ago?
Yeah, so I think the biggest difference is recruiters now trying to mirror, or at least lots of recruitment companies trying to mirror what SaaS companies are doing. So 4 years ago, I don't think recruiters heard the word cadence. I think they literally just picked up the phone and sent some emails. Whereas now recruiters are using tools like we're using at Venatrix, SourceWhale, to actually be able to automate some of those processes for us. And I think it's become a lot more. I don't think you can get away with just picking up the phone now and saying, oh, I've seen you've got a vacancy online, I want to fill it. It's a much more strategic process that everyone is going through, because it is a lot more difficult out there at the moment to get vacancies. You've got to be more strategic with it. And I think picking up the phone should be something that everyone does, but I think you've got to multi-thread it with lots of different avenues of getting in contact with people.
Spot on. Love that. And Dougie, on your side, I said then kind of over the last 3 or 4 years, quite a few bits have changed, and Tara's reflected that. You guys are speaking to dozens of recruiters each week, if not every single day at this rate, I'm sure. What have you seen as the main tonality changes over, say, the last 12 months or so?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, you said over the last 12 months, we talked about the last few years, but I think one of the things that you said to Tara at the start was, have recruiters not always had to use the phone, or do they not always? I actually think it would amaze you how very few recruiters nowadays use the phone or have used the phone over the last 2 to 3 years. There's been a big shift. I look at when I was in recruitment, my training was very much phone based. No one was teaching me how to write nice emails or call to actions or anything. It was, how to get past the gatekeeper and, the kind of traditional, the traditional call openers and things. But really, I think one of the biggest changes and shifts was the pandemic. Like, the pandemic happened and so many recruiters got laid off, like within staffing firms. Like, the world went, let's be honest, it was crazy, right? For that kind of 3 to 6 month period. And then, so a lot of people were laid off or left the industry. And then what happened was this big surge and this boom happened where all of these all of these end clients wanted to hire. So a lot of staffing firms took, like Tara mentioned, that 180 approach where they hired sourcers. And I take this with a pinch of salt, because I don't mean it in the exact way I'm saying, but theoretically it's easier to teach someone how to source than it is to do business development in a strategic, crafted way. So they took the decision to hire sourcers to come in and teach them a repeatable method. And obviously what that meant was that these people were just never exposed to the business development side of the job, because they just didn't need to. Like, companies had too many jobs to work at. I spoke to many organizations and many staffing firms over the last couple of years who said, I wouldn't thank you for any more business right now. I'm quite happy with where I am. Now, obviously the market's changed. And I heard a stat at an event I was at, which said that over 33% of recruiters have never actually had to make a cold call. And that's obviously quite a big transition. So when we're speaking to a lot of people right now, a lot of the focus is not just about getting back onto the business development trail, but it's about getting back onto the business development trail with a lot of people who have never actually had to do it before as well. So it's the business reactivating its business development approach, whilst also coaching a large proportion of its population on how to actually do it in the first place. So yeah, tons there, but like I think like that's my main observation of how the market's changed. And we can talk in terms of like different channels and how each of them are working and what ones are being used most. But I think the biggest challenge right now is actually reactivating a BD muscle that you've maybe not used for a while, or learning how to build that muscle in the first place.
I think for a lot of people, it is that learning element as well, right? Is even the ways of doing BD evolved. A lot of people these days identify that if everyone's doing the same thing, it's really hard to stand out in a tough market, right? So it's not just learning a new skill. It's also how to be in the top 10% of doing it as well, which in itself is a massive challenge, and ultimately why you guys are so well placed, I'd imagine, Dougie. But we've got the good framework there. What's kind of changed, what BD really is, what people are having to start thinking about. I'd love to sort of transition it now a little bit into BD in the SaaS-inspired way, right? And for those who maybe don't know what SaaS is, software as a service, everything you use these days really is SaaS. Your Netflix subscription is a classic B2C SaaS product. If you're using a CRM, very fair chance it's going to be a B2B SaaS product that you're using. Long story short, software that you use in your browser or hosted somewhere in the cloud, right? And companies over the last 10, 15 years in that space have been really hot on BD in general, what we call SDRing. I guess it's mainly the way to look at it here. SDR standing for Sales Development Rep. Marc, in your view, as someone that moved from being in recruitment to now having been in SaaS for what feels like forever. I feel like you're as old as the company at this point. That's how long it feels like you've been around. What would your description be as what it's like in SaaS SDRing versus BD in the recruitment sense?
So I came from temporary medical healthcare recruitment. I started about 6 months before the pandemic, which then when that happened, that was a lot of probably more not on the BD side of it, but actually just getting our services out there, which for the SaaS side of things is a massive it's a massive hurdle, because the difference is, and it's very similar to recruitment, that your agency, when you first started, whether you've been there a while, there's going to be people who haven't heard of you yet, and some may have, but when you're working in SaaS, they don't actually know the product. You're a startup. You're not selling Nike. You're not selling like Ninja air fryers, if you will. It's like actually getting that name there. So the difference is with recruitment, you've got multiple responsibilities, from compliance checks, booking shifts, talking to candidates, and then BD. And most recruiters will then push BD to the bottom of that list because, it can be uncomfortable. Whereas in SaaS, usually the entire job is BD. From a sales point of view, as an SDR, as a BDR, anyone who's a developing rep in sales, your entire job is to BD. And then what kind of the difference is that whereas in recruitment, stereotypically, as Dougie mentioned, it was just, phone and a couple of emails. In SaaS, you end up splitting it up into social, emails, phones, videos, voice notes, even WhatsApp nowadays as well, like prospecting in different methods. So the differences between the two is BD is such a broad subject, but in recruitment, it's kind of been squashed down to a smaller part of the job role. And now as we've kind of progressed past that and more recruiters are taking BD more seriously and trying to train their recruiters to do born BD, they are looking at the SaaS model and understanding, how has it been working from someone who's solely at a BD point of view.
Spot on. And I think this is a really good transition then to Tara, because obviously you mentioned already, Tara, the whole 180, 360. Some companies were talking about 270. At that point, I'd rather we just give it a name. And obviously in SaaS, we have the split between SDRs, AEs. You are an AE, you hire SDRs. I feel like you're perfectly placed to say, what the hell do those two terms mean? Where do they exist inside of the SaaS cycle? And where maybe could recruiters learn from that?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I used to work on the candidate side, so doing 180 recruitment, I used to speak to a lot of recruiters that were making the move into SaaS as an SDR because they were doing 360 recruitment and really struggling to get the balance between both sides of it, because like Marc said, you typically put the BD off because you think, I'd rather do the candidate side because I enjoy that more than being hung up on the phone. And then you get someone that then is doing a job that they only enjoy half of it. So I think that's why a lot of companies have taken that model of doing 180 so that people can actually focus on either or and actually become an expert in that. In terms of it linking into the SaaS world, and something that Venatrix definitely try and copy that model, is having an account executive. So my job is to find new businesses, get in touch with those businesses, then pitch Venatrix, so almost book a demo that then I'm doing the demo of Venatrix, and then we take the job to the team who will then be finding the candidates for that. Something that we're looking at is hiring SDRs, so then having a team that would just then find businesses, book the meeting, and then I would take the meeting, for example.
Who better place to hire SDRs into your team as well, huh?
I know.
Eating your own dog food.
I know. So I think it is something that a lot of recruitment companies will start doing, is following that model.
Interesting.
Did that answer the question?
It did. Yes, it did.
Yeah.
And I was speaking to one of our clients this morning who basically said, look, we've seen your webinar announcement that it's coming, all the rest of it. We're actually hiring an SDR right now, so maybe we should put you in touch, Tara. But their idea is to hire an SDR. And one thing that I love that they're doing, because they're quite a smaller company, is they're saying, we're going to hire an SDR. They will book meetings for the founders to go and meet these clients and say, look, let's understand what it is you're trying to achieve here, form that relationship, and then hand it off to the delivery team, which in a way kind of becomes what we call customer success inside of SaaS. If you have like a SaaS platform, there's a fair chance you've got a customer success manager assigned whose whole job is to make sure you are successful. And whilst the delivery function inside of recruitment is definitely more commercial in nature, it still has that flow of sourcing, closing, and then providing or making sure the service is successful, right? It's really interesting how things are starting to line up that little bit closer. Now, one word that was mentioned earlier on was cadences. And Dougie, I'd love to come to you on this one as well, because you guys, it's your bread and butter when it comes to sequences, cadences. What do you call it inside of SourceWhale?
We call it campaigns inside SourceWhale.
Campaigns.
So
okay, let's
just
throw that word in the mix as well.
Throw another word into the mix and really confuse everyone around the terminology of it. We call it campaigns, but yeah, I think the word sequence and campaign is fairly interchangeable. Cadence, obviously. Cadence, I think, is much more commonly known in SaaS. Sequence and campaign kind of resonates more with staffing firms and recruiters when we're speaking to them. Just a quick point, though, on what you were saying there around the SDR kind of AE and CSM relationship. I remember speaking to Ryan years ago. I was saying to him, a candidate success manager, really, CS, you could replicate the entire SaaS workflow and just have that model inside.
Yeah.
But I think just like you do within a SaaS business, and similar to, I suppose, Tara, what you guys are doing just now at Venatrix, where you have that AE model, but you're doing the kind of SDR and the AE function at the start. You've got to really look at the kind of unit economics of it. So, if you're going to implement a SaaS model, you can also need to look at some of the SaaS metrics around, customer acquisition costs and the margins around it, because it's easy to say, hey, let's split this up and have 3 specialists that only do these 3 things. But if the return in terms of the average revenue generated per individual doesn't justify it and the margins aren't there, then it might feel nice and sound nice and fit into all the nice blocks, but financially might not actually be the best decision for the company. So I think that's also something to bear in mind. Regardless of how appealing it sounds, you've got to make sure that it balances out from a cost-based perspective.
You are absolutely spot on. It's a conversation I had this morning. It's obviously I won't say the curse of recruitment, because it's beautiful in some ways, is that it is generally quite transactional, especially for perm placements. Whereas in SaaS, you sign someone up for a service, generally they'll use your product for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and they'll pay more as time goes by because they'll add more licenses, they'll buy more, whatever it might be. How do you think that maybe relates to a lot of there's creative ways of saying we do recruitment for you now, such as like talent solutions, which are more on like a service basis where you might pay a regular amount per month to receive a number of CVs or service a number of roles? Do you think maybe there's a lesson there in trying to move towards that side of things in terms of the actual end product you provide? Or do you think it's better just saying, look, stick to perm recruitment, it's the way to be? What's your view on that, Dougie?
So I think, again, you can take lessons from a SaaS perspective onto that as well. And again, I've got big opinions on QBRs and how you make sure that those QBRs actually provide value and they're beneficial. But there's no reason why, even in a perm situation, you wouldn't have to go full hog and revolutionize things into like a talent as a service approach or anything. But you could absolutely be having like regular checkpoints with people, understanding the longer term business goals and ensuring the solution that you're providing is relevant to that. And providing industry insights. I think that's another thing. If we look at kind of managing an existing account base and making sure that we're generating as much revenue from it as possible, we want to make sure that we're consistently providing value to those accounts. And one way we can do that is through a QBR. And if I'm in a recruitment sense, there's market intel, market insights, salary benchmarking. There's a ton of stuff that you could create that probably wouldn't take much time to do, that would allow you to regularly check in with those accounts to map out what hiring might look like moving forward and provide advice. Let's be honest, the market, Venatrix is an example, Tara, you guys are operating in a market which is, SaaS, and there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of changes. The world has looked very different every quarter pretty much in the SaaS space over the last 12 months. So, being able to provide value and insights to these people because you're so connected to so many different parts of the ecosystem, I think would be pretty awesome. So, yeah, I think in answer to your question, you could definitely move away from a transactional element if that's what you're doing currently, without the need to completely overhaul your entire operating model. Is my thoughts on that one. But Tara, I don't know if you guys are doing anything like that just now. Because you guys do value-added services. I remember speaking to Elaine a while ago and talking around like the training and coaching and stuff that you do for the candidates and things as well.
Yeah, so we do training after the candidate has started the job. So there's an 8-module sales academy that the candidates will all take part on. The customer success thing has been something that we've spoken about a lot, and it's something that from the cost perspective we're getting our operations manager to look into doing that. So she's now sort of taken the responsibility of operations manager, customer success manager, to see how that goes, because like you said, it's a lot to hire another person to do that role if you don't know exactly what it's going to look like. from the start. But yeah, I think it is important. You can't just place people and never speak to the client or the candidate again. So yeah, I think it is a really important part of recruitment that needs to be focused on.
100%.
I do want to give a shout out, by the way, now I think about it. I know Ingenio, a recruiter, they've got a customer success manager, which is in my inbox every single week, and I feel bad because I don't reply to her enough. But I know they've got a CSM and they are trying to kind of play with that model. But I'm completely with you, Dougie, at the end of the day. Start at the end, work backwards. What do you need to be generating from the SDRs or whatever you want to call them at the front of your pipe to make this a profitable model that you guys are operating, right? But coming back to that point around sequences and cadences and campaigns, what the hell are they, Dougie? Why are they important? Why are SaaS companies obsessed with them? Why has SourceWhale got it as such a central part of their products?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it pretty much is our product, right? So, like, I think it's just because, like, as we talk about how business development's evolved over time, like taking a more strategic approach to business development has meant that, and the rise of SaaS companies and competition meant that, you know, you couldn't just reach out to someone, have one conversation because what you were offering was unique and get the business. So that meant that there was a need for like a more consistent and persistent approach to business development. But consistency and persistency is hard to do manually. Essentially, it's very hard to remember to reach out to someone certain days apart and everything else. And it's also very hard to, if you're trying to be consistent and persistent manually, to understand what's working and what isn't as part of your approach. So as a data-driven approach came into it, as a need to be more consistent and persistent came into it, the kind of this need for sequencing cadences or campaigns was kind of formed. And, you know, that's been in the SaaS space for a number of years now. There's tools like Outreach, there's tools like SalesLoft, you know, very well known billion-dollar organizations. And we've obviously kind of taken that kind of concept into the recruitment space. And yeah, again, I think like the big key part here, the takeaway from it is that business development has changed, and the need to be, like I said, consistent and persistent is an absolute must. And you know, software like SourceWhale obviously helps people to make sure that they can execute that basically on a daily basis. Tara, obviously going from your perspective, and not necessarily just on SourceWhale, but on the concept in general, like, has it made a difference to you from like a business development perspective to have like a cadence or sequence or campaign in place versus just trying to do things manually?
Just to jump in, before you came in the room earlier, Dougie, she was digging it up.
I love it. Yeah, it's interesting. I was at an event a couple of months ago, and a recruitment director was talking around cadences, and the person that was hosting the event said, "Oh, can you just stop and explain to everyone what a cadence is?" Because there were about 4 people in the room who were who knew what a cadence was. So it just isn't something that people are familiar with. Whereas for SDRs and AEs and SaaS, it's, you probably say that, Marc, you must say that word 100 times a day of like, is your cadence up to date? Have you updated your cadence? But yeah, it's even for things, if someone's like, it's not the right time now, call me back in 3 months, that person gets put into a cadence. If I don't put them into a cadence, yes, I'll still put it on the CRM, I'll still create a task. I just think it's easier for that person to get lost. Whereas the moment that I get that, put them into my SourceWhale cadence, they're getting an email every month. I can put a notification to call them. I just think it just manages half of my brain basically, which is what I need.
Out of sight, out of mind until you got to think about it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I don't really, I think it comes back to the COVID thing of pre-COVID or even in COVID, everyone got so much business coming inbound that you didn't really have to think about anything strategically. Whereas now it is such a competition to win business. If you're not doing it strategically and actually have a plan to be able to do it, it's going to be really difficult.
Spot on. And I'm not trying to leave you in the corner, by the way, Marc, I promise. I actually do want to come to you on this one as well, because your whole job, it feels, is putting together sequences, campaigns, cadences, whatever you want to call them for your team. It can be day 1, email and phone call, day 3, follow-up email, day 5, connect on LinkedIn, day 7, make another phone call, and it goes on and on and on. One thing that I know we've spoken about an awful lot is personalization, because 3-4 years ago, it was super generic cadence with no personalization. Oh, hi, I understand you might be hiring for this role. Are you interested in the conversation? If everyone's sending the same email, you don't stand out. So at the minute in SaaS, there's been a big drive towards how can we personalize this and make it seem that actually we've chosen to get in touch with you for a specific reason because we know that we can help you out here. what are you seeing as the trends around that? How are you dealing with personalization in sequences for our SDRs?
So currently I'm operating from a model from Chris as well, from a 10-80-10 model. So the majority of the issues you will solve or the specialists that you will recruit for a certain industry or for certain companies, the main part of that is we have these candidates that can do X, Y, Z. These are the skills they possess. Or if it's SaaS, it's you're targeting with SDRs, for an example, would be like, cool, here's what they've got of X, Y, and Z. The difference is that first sort of top part of the email, and obviously SourceWhale, you got a fantastic new AI generated like content and relevance. You got Lavender that's been doing on emails for the SaaS world as well quite consistently. But what I've now seen is the fact of people are now getting a lot more, their standards have raised to what they're replying to. So it's like you can't just have personalization. You now have to have that relevance. So we like to call it creative relevance. There's no point like bringing up that someone had a childhood dog called Mickey, right? If you're now trying to supply SDRs, because what on earth is the relevance with that? You just look really, really creepy. So it's like, it's more than just show me you know me now. It's show me you know me and how it's going to help me now. And that's a hell of a long acronym for someone who's not that great with letters. But when you actually look at the whole personalization, it needs to be a scalable process, because you can almost fall in what I like to call like the procrastination trap. So I'm going to write this fantastic email. I've checked out their Twitter. I've checked out where they went to school. Like I know a friend of a friend of a friend's nan that, you know, they were friends, and next thing you know, 25 minutes has gone by and you've done one email and you've got 36 other to go. It's 2:30. And then the rest of those emails don't get that same care and due diligence. So with personalization, it has to be relevant. And this is a trap everyone falls into. Like, hey, notice you went to University of Wolverhampton. Great. I have 2 eyes and nose and an ears as well. Like, okay. Like, what are you trying to do?
I think I joked about this last week on a LinkedIn post where someone had gone, oh, we both did this together. I was like, yeah, we also breathe the same air. Like, congratulations, right? It has got to be relevant to that person.
But difference is 2 years ago, you would have been absolutely blown away by that, because personalization has only really started coming in properly over the last few years. Like, you look at job adverts, you look at anything now, the stereotypical quality has had to increase because there's just so much out there. So to recap, for personalization, how we would scale it or even go about it, relevance is king. If it's not relevant, you're irrelevant. Make it scalable. Not everything has to be done within an inch of its life, looking like Sherlock Holmes going into it. And the last part is the fact you have to manage the time aspect of what you're spending on it, because you have to prioritize the time you're spending on your personalization, because personalization is your biggest, strongest, like most incredible weapon in business development, but it's a double-edged sword because you can end up wasting so much time on it as well.
Absolutely spot on as well. I love that piece around the bit in the middle as well. Really, it's like an 80-20 rule. Like, you'll get the vast majority of your outcome for the minimum parts of your effort. So don't overinvest time in doing research and things like that, right? Completely spot on.
It's
one thing I'd really be curious to dig into, and this is, go on.
It's like when people look at the emails, you only see like the first 16 to 25 words anyway. That's where you want your personalization to stand out. I think it was SaaSdoc Dublin. I think it was someone over at SalesDoc mentioned, oh, do you know how many words people typically see on their smartwatch when they open an email? Like, most people, the working business, recruitment, have some sort of smartwatch. When you open your emails, you open them on a phone or a smartwatch, compared to your MacBook, your laptop, your desktop. So it's got to be like optimized for that. So if you're putting your personalization like smack in the middle of it, chances are it's not going to get read. But if you can nail it in the first part and just at the end part, so it feels a lot more human, a lot more engaged, then you've done 20% of the work with the 80% doing it for you, and you're going to get much more of that out in the time period.
Yeah, spot on. I mean, I imagine Dougie sympathizes with this, getting bombarded. You just come back from that holiday, Dougie, for example. I guarantee your inbox is full of people dying to sell or do business with the CRO right now. And it will only be the ones that do feel like they really understand you that like you're going to respond to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, do you know what? Like, I empathize with people as well. Like, I've been that guy. Like I, you know, if we got on to talk about multi-threading, if we run out of time, then fine. But you know, multi-threading, like I still support the sending of business development messages as part of our business development approach. Like, you know, for the kind of larger accounts and things. So I empathize with everyone. I think what's happened though, like on Marc's comment there, is it's actually a good thing. Like, basically, as people get better, it improves the quality of everyone else. No one was personalizing, then everyone started personalizing. Now it's relevant personalization, and I'm sure in 2 or 3 years it'll be something else. But everyone's just, the thing about business development is you watch this video back in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, and this will all either feel like nonsense or basic or outdated. Does that make sense? And I think that's the craft. That's what I love so much about business development, is like it's a craft that continuously evolves. And so many people are so passionate about it that they're always trying to make it better as well. So yeah, I agree with Mark, but we probably, whilst we would like rue the fact that we need to put more time and effort into things now maybe than what we did before, and inboxes are much busier and stuff, it actually creates an ability for us to like innovate a little bit and find something that's a little bit unique.
And the real blessing is if it's doing all the follow-ups for you and scheduling your tasks in for you, no doubt all the innovations coming to CRMs these days around automating as much admin work as possible. There is more time you can put into that relevant personalization, right? And I'm sure, like you say, there'll be so many changes over the next 2 or 3 years. It'll be crazy. I'll be surprised if at that point AI is writing the vast majority of the emails for us, just finding out what is relevant. Whoever does that,
100%.
a lot of money coming.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I mean, one area on this that I'm personally really passionate about is I feel like compensation is arguably the strongest tool you've got to motivate someone to do something, right? You can talk about setting targets against it. We do an awful lot. Ultimately, wherever you put someone's commission is where they're going to put the most focus, right? So one big thing like that I advised the client I spoke to this morning on was saying, most recruiters, when they do this, they'll still want to pay commission when a placement closes, which makes total sense in recruitment as well. It's when the money comes in. I understand that. But fundamentally, if you've got an SDR who you want to focus on booking you meetings in so you can go and sit down with clients and get work with them, you've got to start putting some kind of incentivization around that early part of the journey, actually getting the meeting booked in. Now, one thing I did say also this morning was around qualification. Like, we have a qualification criteria at OneUp where we say, okay, if an SDR is booking a meeting in, we need to verify that they are on the CRM they say they're on. Have they got at least 10 people? Do we integrate with the CRM? Are we speaking to the right person? And do they have a problem or a need or something that's happened in their world that means this is now a really relevant time for us to have a conversation? Otherwise, they'll be booking their nan in, for example, for a meeting going, yeah, cheers, I'll collect my 60 quid commission or whatever it might be. We've got to have a good think about that. But the client did say when it comes around to qualification, we don't really care if they're not hiring right now. We would just like to start building that relationship. So a whole idea came around, okay, then let's pay 20 quid for a meeting with someone that's not hiring right now, but we know could be in the next 12 months. And if they are hiring right now, we'll pay 40 or something like that. So I'm really curious to get your guys' opinion on compensation in this side as well. Again, we know that SaaS is really good at focusing on paying on meeting bookings. What lessons, and I'll come to you for this one first, Tara, what lessons do you think recruiters can take from that on how to incentivize that upfront behavior?
So it's a difficult one. So with my role, I'm not targeted on meetings booked purely on the basis of we think there's no point having a pointless meeting and like thinking, oh, I'm going to go and meet this person that we know isn't going to hire. I can still go and meet that person for a coffee and build that relationship, but it's not a goal of mine that I'm like obsessed with all day, every day. How we have done it is we split the business development side of the fee. So the fee gets split in half between the delivery side and the business development side. And then that then gets split into 3 different parts. So the person that booked the meeting, as in like when it closes, you then get that commission. The person that runs the whole assessment process that we do, and the interview process, and then the person that's done the pitch and the terms. So then if you do have someone that's ramping up and is just at the stage that I'm at now, so not doing the full pitch and doing terms, then I still get either side of the commission side of it. So I think it's really important that when people are doing 180 recruitment, that they don't just feel like, oh, I'm just filling a part that someone else isn't doing, and you still feel like you're very valued in that. And I think like Marc does a great job of that, of like linking up the SDRs and the AEs, doing a lot of multi-threading, everyone working together, because you don't want an SDR to just feel like they're booking a meeting, and you don't want a 180 recruiter to feel like they're just finding a candidate or just finding a client. So I think that works really well for us, of breaking that fee up into 3 different parts. So even if there's been lots of different people involved in that, everyone still gets part of that fee.
Small interjection before I come to on the compensation front, Dougie. Multi-threading. I think we've said it 2 or 3 times. I realize we haven't defined what it means. What is multi-threading in your books?
So
Okay.
oh, sorry, are you asking Dougie?
No,
or
you
me?
go.
You go, Dougie.
Go for it. No, you go for
Up
it.
to either of you, share the answer if you want.
Well, when I was at OneUp, which is actually where I like really learnt the term, is linking two people together. So like if I was struggling to get into an account, I would ask an SDR to help me, and we'd multi-thread that account. So doing different activities to different people in the business to then try and book the meeting.
Spot on. Same idea in your head as well, Dougie?
Yeah, absolutely. There's two examples of it. One to multiple, which is for example, if you guys all worked at a business together, I would be reaching out to Tara, Marc, and to you, Derry. But relative to the problems that you have within the organization, I would be approaching you with slightly different messaging. Or there's multiple to multiple, which is what we typically employ, where we have like, I'll reach out to someone in the C-suite, for example, and then we'll have our VP reaching out to someone within the kind of senior management team, an AE reaching out to kind of middle management, and an SDR maybe kind of floating to figure out the best one amongst those three to reach out to as well. So there's, I think, two different approaches to it. I'm sure there's probably more, but those are the two that we see most commonly.
Spot on. And then back on that compensation point as well, what are your thoughts around that?
I think there's a hybrid, man. Like, honestly, like, I think there's a hybrid to be had. Going back to your point earlier around, I really like the way that Tara's and Venatrix are doing it. I think going back to your point earlier about paying for meetings where there's not opportunity, the one thing I'd always say about business development is like, you've got to build pipeline in business development as well as like a sales pipeline. I think people use the term pipeline when they think of like a qualified opportunity or a job on and managing it through the pipeline. Actually, there's a pipeline before that, which is the BD one. And it's, most people will do business from callbacks and things, and actually, being able to manage that, build that up and build that relationship. So I'm not so sure if I would it depends on the circumstances, pay cash on a meeting for meeting's sake. I would probably more so encourage that SDR to nurture that through the pipeline and keep in touch with it until it's ready. Hybrid, we at SourceWhale right now, we pay flat based upon a qualified opportunity, but we want people to be more emotionally connected to the process, similar to, I suppose, what Tara and she mentioned Marc does, where you don't want people to just feel like they're sitting bums in seats. So we are exploring keeping that in place, but also looking at a percentage of the kind of closed revenue so that they're motivated to bring good quality opportunities to the table that will likely buy a significant number of licenses from us and stay with us for a long period of time. So kind of motivate them across those three metrics. But I'd be lying if I said I had that successfully in place at the moment. I don't, but I think that's probably where we're going to go to moving forward.
It's a never-ending iteration as well. If you like, at the minute we do for the SDRs, they get 2.5% of any deal that they book the meeting for. So when it closes, they get that based on the first year revenue, and then they also get a variable amount, 30, 60, or 90 quid, based on the size of the opportunity they book in. So I don't know the exact tiers. I'm sure Marc will have it basically committed to memory at this point. We have different tiers where you get different amounts as you work your way through, and we'll keep on testing and iterating.
Plan. That's a pretty good commission plan. I hope our SDRs don't hear that.
It's definitely not bad. I guarantee we closed some pretty big business in Q4, and I guarantee there was definitely one happy SDR when they started paying earlier this year. Marc, coming to you as well, because obviously your job primarily is keeping them motivated, driving them forward, for example. How do you go about motivating these people whose job it is to pick up the phone all day, every day, multiple times and be told, no, 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 no?
One of the main things about it is actually just understanding that is going to happen. I think a lot of people, there's almost a lot of success born with business development, like, I made 14 calls and booked 3 meetings. And then you start comparing yourself and then you're like, well, I've made $40 and I've got a call back in December. And then you end up kind of like, your head drops. So it's giving your team the actual realistic view of what this is going to be like. The next is that as much as you'll have people at different levels and different skill levels, and it's always good to show what good looks like from one person, every single person is unique. Every single person is different. We have a team of 7 SDRs, and all of their pitches, although they hit the same pain points, are slightly different. How they want to write their emails is slightly different. So you have to motivate them all slightly different as well. So when you're actually understanding them, what they're going to have set out for them, you were going to say?
I was just about to say, I'm completely on board with the whole idea of not forcing a script down someone's throat either. The worst thing you can do is write something in your language, your verbiage, and expect someone to sound as confident as you delivering it when it's not the way they'd speak. Completely on board with that.
I think that's actually a mistake I fell into when I was first doing leadership. I was there like, hey, like, you want to open cold calls? Like, hey, would it be the worst thing in the world if I told you this was a cold call? And I know I can get away with that. And then I gave it to one of my reps, and I heard him say it, and I was like, whoa. I was like, we need to find you something a little bit different, I think. Something that suits your personality, maybe. And it's like, the same as like the motivation side of it as well. It's like trying to get each person motivated. I've got 2 reps that I know, and understanding what they really want and what they're doing it for, and understanding their why and what's going to motivate them is key. I've got 2 people who are absolutely excited to save up to buy a house, buy their first house. I've got someone who's just so focused on career progression at the moment, it's borderline obsessive. So it's like, if I was to say, hey, you've made X amount of money, you're going to make this money. It's like, oh, great. But if I go, you're like a few points off getting above target to start looking at the promotion, he's going to be more motivated with that option than the other. So it's like trying to keep people motivated. No 2 people are the same. Everyone says they're money motivated, but if you don't understand the why they're money motivated, then you're going to tar everyone with the same brush and then get confused by any part of your team motivated. So that's how I would say you kind of need to motivate them, is understanding their whys. Although you let them show what good looks like, don't let them compare themselves. And don't buy into the success porn that's all over LinkedIn, because you'll just beat yourself up and you need so much more context. Like, you could have the best candidates for a specific type of job role, and then they just fly off the shelf. Whereas this other person could be selling into such a saturated market where they've got really tough competition, like they're competing against Venatrix, or you're competing against SourceWhale, and you're going to compare yourself. And it's like, there's so many things you need to take into consideration. So like, just keeping your blinders on when it comes to like the success stuff all over LinkedIn, because I put money on it that half the time it's not even true.
I hear about this stuff a lot, to be fair, not even just in sales either, but across different roles, is that if you do compare yourself too much to what you see on LinkedIn, you are seeing the top 1% of creators on LinkedIn an awful lot talking about their success, and you have got to be really careful and understand it's not all plain sailing like some might have you believe. It is a hard job ultimately, right? And I think all of us will sympathize with that, whether it's in recruitment or whether it's in SaaS. I am slightly conscious of time though as well. I know we're going about 40 minutes or so. So I'd love to just kind of give each of you a minute here to wrap up on sort of top tips that you'd love to share to anyone looking to really get started with BD. And we'll start at the top. Dougie, what are your top tips that you give to recruiters looking to get started with BD outside of book a demo with SourceWhale?
Yeah, I mean that's the obvious one. No, I think the
thing is, he didn't plug himself. I plugged him, so it's okay.
There we go. That's it. It's within the rules. No, but honestly, thank you. But I think like the main tip. I've got 60 seconds. Look at what roles you're filling. Look at the types of jobs that you actually make money from, and then use that to inform the types of companies that you actually target. It's actually fairly common that you see a lot of organizations targeting different role types or different organizations based upon what's worked for them in the past, but without the data to actually back that up. I think when you are confident that you have a high fill rate, a quick time to fill, and have like a lot of success and case studies around a particular niche or ICP/ideal client persona, then it's much easier to do a confident business development approach to those people. And I could sit and talk about that for hours, but really the takeaway is use the bottom of the funnel, so the point that you actually generate revenue and the data around that to inform who you target at the top of the funnel. So I'll shut up and I'll pass the imaginary ball to Tara, who can take us through that one.
Yeah, mine definitely echoes what Dougie said. I think one of the most important things that I've learned is like fill your list with a list of people that you actually want to speak to and are the right people to be speaking to. I think that research part for salespeople is typically the part they don't enjoy the most. I mean, I certainly don't enjoy it the most, but actually investing the time in that, getting that good list that then you do want to have those conversations. Be genuine and be really curious. Try not to go into any business development call just trying to book a meeting, just trying to get a vacancy. I always want the prospect to be like, oh, great question, or I've never been asked that question before, because it shows that you are actually finding out lots of information that other recruiters aren't asking them. And be as memorable as possible, because even if they're not hiring now, they're going to remember you from that call where you're putting them on the spot, asking them lots of direct questions that aren't always directly about hiring, can be about pipeline, or anything within reason, and try to do it that way as well. So don't always be focused on getting that vacancy on that first call.
You potentially in Pandora's box there. I'd love to explore all things around like being memorable, adding value, because demand generation is a big term that we will not go into on this call, but that's a whole conversation itself inside of the SourceWhale board at the moment, and I'll mention a couple of resources in a minute around that. Before we get there though, Marc, what are your top tips?
Start actually going into your BD with a plan. A lot of people say, I'm going to make some calls today, and echoing what Dougie and Tara said about you want to look at the bottom of the funnel and you want to make sure you have the right list. The next part, and what people forget, is that you need to keep yourself to a schedule. So if you know you've got a certain amount of people to call, you need to set yourself a time and stick to it. Creative relevance is the most powerful tool wherever you go, because you don't need to just save it for your emails. People do so much research and then just go, oh, cool, I'm going to send them the most wicked email, and then we'll open with the most generic call opener you've ever heard. But if you've done that research, using it at every step of your sales process, or your prospecting, your cadence, your sequence, your campaign, most importantly, have fun. You're going to be doing this a lot. I've made thousands of cold calls and I'm still laughing because I'm hilarious, but you do need to enjoy what you're doing, because if you don't, they can hear you going through the motions. And I've had cold calls where I can tell, and I've had some of the worst BD calls I've ever received this year, which I won't go into, but I could tell they would just go for it like, oh, do you have any roles I could fill? What? No. Goodbye. And then I've had those that really stood out because it's been creative, it's been relevant, it's related back to me, and they sound like they're enjoying it. So stick to your time schedules, plan, use your research throughout. Creative relevance is your best friend.
Really good high-level tips there. Love that. So just to kind of recap, we've gone through some really good stuff today. We've gone through that intro to what the hell actually is BD, what is a sequence slash campaign slash cadence, whatever you want to call it, really is your choice at this point. What are the different roles that we see in SaaS? How can that be applied across the recruitment, with the asterisk of make sure it makes sense for your business model, run the numbers first before you just start blindly hiring and copying it. Really good point in that one, Dougie. We spoke a little bit around creative relevance and personalization, some good tips from Marc in the middle of that as well. A little bit around compensation. And honestly, I'd love to go into way more depth on all kinds of things around tech that you can look into, metrics to measure. Maybe if there's good follow-up off the back of this one and people are interested, we'll look to do a second one where we do get into some really nitty-gritty areas based on what people are into. So if you're watching this and you do have ideas, drop one of us a DM, let us know. We'll happily put on some further sessions exploring different areas around this as well. Honestly, it's such a wonderful area of sales that is really worth getting into. And like Marc said, having fun with it as well. And just one final shout out I'll give before we fully wrap things up. Cognism are a data provider. This is not a sponsorship thing, by the way. They're a data provider, but they have got this whole thing that I mentioned earlier around demand gen, spot on, where basically they have got templates upon templates on how to do cold calls, how to do emails, what a good sequence looks like. SourceWhale obviously will help you with this sort of stuff as well. But if you want different ideas from around the internet on how to do these things, do go check out their website. Everything is free and open. You don't have to give your email details or anything like that. They just put it out there to help people. There's tons of resources out there. If you want links to it, give one of us a shout. I'm sure we are all more than happy to help. But guys, it's been wonderful. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you all so much for coming along and sharing your thoughts as well. Hope you get to do it again soon, and hope you'll have a wonderful afternoon.
Amazing. Thanks so much for having me.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Catch you all later.
Bye.